Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is very difficult, admittedly, to have had to listen to the Honorable Prime Minister in his loudest of loud voices rant and rave about everything, all sound and fury signifying nothing, disguising the fact that he had nothing to say and 45 minutes within which to say it. But you see, Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister's entire contribution could perhaps best have been summarized by his own words when he said, and I quote, "Prime Minister, where are you leaving to go to?" No. What is this, a hit and run? What is this, a hit and run? You're afraid to hear the conversations? Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister's own contribution can best be summed up in his own words. And it's ironic that we have to hear it from the Honorable Prime Minister himself. When he said, and I quote, "When you get up and you make statements in this Parliament that are not true," end quote, "people may believe you." In fact, that's the end of the quote. When you get up and make statements that are not true, people may believe you. That's the quotation, Madam Speaker, from the Honorable Prime Minister, whose best time in office was best exemplified by what has become known as Emailgate. That is the gentleman that I have to now respond to. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister came here and said that we on this side were talking about don't borrow, don't borrow, don't borrow, don't borrow. That is absolutely untrue. Completely untrue. As a matter of fact, the Prime Minister also said that, let me use his words against him, Madam Speaker. If the Prime Minister does not understand finance, or if he does, then he is deliberately misleading the House, deliberately misleading the country, Madam Speaker. Nobody is saying not to borrow. What we are saying is when you borrow, you should be borrowing with a purpose in mind. You should be borrowing not just to repay debt. And as a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, both the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister admitted that this country is now at a stage where our borrowing is only to repay debt. We are digging ourselves deeper and deeper into a debt crisis under this government, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister began his rant by talking about recognizing the realities of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Boasted then that if you think things bad, people complain that things are bad. Look, and talking about people not being able to find a park tomorrow, as if everything is all right in this country, Madam Speaker. Totally oblivious to the facts and the realities facing the people of this country, Madam Speaker. For them, everything is going great. For them, Madam Speaker, for those on the opposite side, this country is doing very, very well. This is a Minister of Finance, Madam Speaker, that talks about a success while the country collapses. Madam Speaker, I wonder now what his true agenda would have been. If we have a situation we have no foreign exchange, Madam Speaker, mass unemployment, negative foreign direct investment, and collapsing infrastructure, and that is how the Minister of Finance recognizes and believes is a success, then I wonder what his agenda is, because it's certainly not the same as the agenda that is on our side, Madam Speaker. Our agenda is about development of people, development of the country, not the success that the minister is claiming when the country is falling apart. This is the same government that seems to be obsessed, Madam Speaker, with misdirection, misrepresentation, trying to deceive the population, trying to convince the population, withdrawn, Madam Speaker, trying to convince the population that all is well. We have a Minister of National Security, we have a Minister of Energy saying that there's great success in bid rounds. When 9 out of 13, there was no bid for 9 out of 13 blocks in the recent bid round. But Minister of Energy is saying that's a success. The Minister of National Security is claiming great success when we are buried under by crime. Every single day we have murders upon murders in block, Madam Speaker. The Minister of Finance, like I said, is talking about success when we have no foreign exchange, lower GDP. The Ministry of Works and Transport is boasting about success when we have flooding. The Ministry of Public Utilities is boasting about success when we have persons in Oropouche, West and throughout the country that don't have water for weeks and months on end. That is their definition of success, Madam Speaker. That tells you, Madam Speaker, what their agenda really is. It is not in the interest of Trinidad and Tobago. It is not for the interest or the benefit of the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, both the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance raved about the report from the IMF. Raved about it. As a matter of fact, the Prime Minister boasted and said, you should be proud when you travel the world to see the issues that are being addressed here, the wonderful reports that the IMF has submitted. The IMF report is something good. It says something good is happening. That's the Prime Minister saying that. The Minister of Finance boasted that this is a wonderful report on the government of Trinidad and Tobago and how well the economy is doing. Madam Speaker, the IMF report, just for information, is based on information provided by the government. And if the information provided by the government is incorrect, then the IMF's conclusions will not be correct. Nobody's saying the IMF is PNM, except for those on the opposite side, Madam Speaker. So I want to treat with two of the issues, just two instances, two of the comments made in the IMF report cited by both the Prime Minister and the Minister of Minister of Finance. I read from the IMF Executive Board report, press release, PR 24/200, dated June 5th, 2024. Issue number 1, international reserve coverage is expected to remain adequate at 7.5 months of prospective total imports. This is one of the foundation stones on the basis of which the IMF would have made its pronouncement, that international reserve coverage is expected to remain adequate at 7.5 months of prospective total imports, provided this comment provided by the IMF on June 5th, 2024. Madam Speaker, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, in her wonderful, exceptionally informative presentation, made it very clear. She provided the statistics that, in fact, what we have today is not 7.5 months of import coverage, Madam Speaker. In fact, I believe it was 6.8. So already the IMF statistic is wrong. 6.8 months of import cover, Madam Speaker. That is the lowest that we have had in over 20 years. 6.7 months of import coverage, Madam Speaker. In fact, based only on foreign exchange reserves, Madam Speaker, we have seen a 50% crash in foreign exchange reserves over the last 9 years under the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Finance. We have moved from $10.5 billion in September 2015 to $5.4 billion in April 2024. That's the state we are in now, Madam Speaker. Not the 7.8 the IMF based its conclusions on, substantially less. And this is, Madam Speaker, despite this government having borrowed over $3.7 billion US over the last 9 years on the external market, and further having raided the HSF of an additional $2.5 billion, all used to prop up the foreign exchange reserves at the central bank. So, Madam Speaker, the Minister added a total of $6.2 billion via debt and saving withdrawals to the foreign exchange reserves, as opposed to earning it. As opposed to earning it as a country from regular productive and trade activities, what we have today, after all of that borrowing, after all of that padding of the foreign exchange reserves, after all of that, we still have the lowest foreign exchange reserves we have had in decades, Madam Speaker. We've had the lowest import cover in decades. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, I went to the Central Bank Data Center to try to find out when last the import cover was as low as it is, Madam Speaker. When it got to December 2005, the Central Bank Data Center didn't have information thereafter. So at least 20 years, 2 decades, this is the lowest level of import coverage. So, Madam Speaker, just on that one instance, Just on that one instance, a foundation on which the IMF made its conclusions, the IMF information is wrong. The other one, Madam Speaker, again I'm quoting from the IMF document, the IMF report. The fiscal position is projected to remain adequate, reaching a deficit of 2.7% of GDP in financial year 2024, fiscal year 2024. That is the quote, Madam Speaker. But we already know we have not completed we have not finished the financial year yet, and we already know that in fact the fiscal deficit is twice what the minister had estimated. 2 times, it's 100% higher than what he had estimated, Madam Speaker. So therefore, again, the IMF's basis on making its conclusion is wrong. And therefore, Madam Speaker, if the basis of the conclusions are, if the basis of the information being provided which forms the basis on which the IMF makes its conclusion remarks, in which it makes its assessment is incorrect, then clearly the IMF's findings would be wrong. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, I would encourage the IMF Executive Board to return to Trinidad and Tobago and come back and make the changes to reflect what the true facts are as are currently available to them, Madam Speaker. This report was dated June 5th. We are now on June 7th, and already we know that their statistics on which they base their conclusions are wrong, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I also want to refer to a couple of other issues that the Prime Minister raised. The Prime Minister spoke about we on this side wanted to see the country fail. Madam Speaker, let me make it very, very clear. Let me make it very, very clear. And we have made this very clear before. Nobody, no citizen, and definitely none of the representatives on this side of the bench of the parliamentary chamber, Madam Speaker, wants to see this country fail, despite the PR and the distraction of those opposite. Those of us, Madam Speaker, who live in the real world and interact with our fellow citizens on a regular and continuous basis, we know the serious hardships that people are facing today as a result of this government policies. And what we want is honest, truthful government spending public funds for the benefit of these 1.4 billion citizens, not just for friends, family, and financiers, Madam Speaker. That's what the country wants. So when we see a government wasting billions of dollars in corruption, spending on vanity projects, while citizens flounder in poverty, it is our duty then to object. It is our duty as elected representatives and as citizens of this country to hold this government to account, to call them out as we are doing today on its failures and deliberate misinformation, Madam Speaker. This is not a PNM meeting, Madam Speaker, and I am not going to stand here and clap while the minister refuses to provide information, Madam Speaker. That's unfortunate. I am very clear about what my job is, and my job, Madam Speaker, is to hold this government to account, and I will continue to do so without fear or favor, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we are here today to discuss the supplementary increase in the budget. The Prime Minister made a big woo-ha-ha in his loudest tone, big set of noise about the leader of the opposition not understanding that this is an estimate and this is is not cast in stone. The leader of the opposition is very correct when she said that every single one of those items for which supplementary variation is being sought now was known at the time of the preparation of the annual budget. These are all arrears and should have been considered in that budget. She's absolutely correct. But you see, Madam Speaker, it is in the interest of the members on that side to create the illusion that these are new things. These are things that, you know, and I said it in a press conference recently. I said it that the minister is going to come and say, you know, this thing is not an absolute fixed way. It's not fixed in stone. It's not an absolute science. There will be things that will change, etc. Of course, there will be things that will change. But every single one of those items that came to the Standing Finance Committee, Madam Speaker, was based on arrears. It was based on debts. It was based on gratuities. It was based on predictable things that should have been in the annual budget. Madam Speaker, the estimates, the documents, I'm sorry, I don't have a copy of one of them here, but the documents that come with the annual budget is titled Draft Estimates. And for example, I'll use the expenditure one. Draft estimates of the expenditure for the financial year and the year in question. So for 2024, it will be draft estimates of the expenditure of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year 2024. It doesn't say for 6 months, it doesn't say for 9 months, it says for the financial year. So when the government comes subsequently, like they are doing now, to replenish what they under-budgeted and underfunded, they should accept it for what it is. It is to replenish an under-budgeted figure. They're creating the impression, and the Prime Minister was on and off, on and on about, we don't understand this and it's not exact science. It is not an exact science, but nothing that, I guess I'm repeating myself for emphasis, Madam Speaker, nothing that was in that variation, nothing that was in that was before the Standing Finance Committee was not predictable. They deliberately missed, they deliberately understated and undervalued, Madam Speaker. And there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. The reason for that, Madam Speaker, is because they wanted to coax the international lending agencies into believing that things were right. Things were right. I've just indicated that the IMF needs to come back and fix their business. Madam Speaker, both the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance throughout this devaluation talk again. Every single year they come here and they alone talk about it. And they refer to other people, some unnamed individuals, stating that these economists and these people are saying devalue, devalue, and they are doing so great. They're doing such a wonderful job in not devaluing. Madam Speaker, that's a bogeyman. That's a distraction. That's an illusion. The talk about devaluation is only being fostered by those on that side for the sole purpose of distracting from the fact that we are currently in a foreign exchange crisis, foreign exchange reserve crisis, Madam Speaker. That's where we are today. I will come back to that in a few minutes, Madam Speaker. The Prime Minister also made a big brouhaha about employment. The Leader of the Opposition, referencing a document, the Auditor General's report for 2023, cited that the Auditor General had such a grave concern about short-term employment that she actually did a section, a full section on that. I wouldn't repeat the section. I think the Leader of the Opposition has already indicated the basic contents of it and the fact that some of these things were likely to be illegal. It is likely that not likely, Madam Speaker, the Auditor General was very clear and the Leader of the Opposition raised it, that in going past the 6-month requirement for contract for short-term labor, those entities that are doing that, and that's the government that is doing that is in fact in breach of the law. I heard today, amazingly, the Prime Minister of this country say, so what? So what if they're going past the 6 months? Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister could, I am hoping that one of the members on the opposite side will get up and provide a different citation. Because I clearly heard the Prime Minister say, so what? Breaking the law may be nothing important to them, but the law is there for a reason, Madam Speaker, and for a Prime Minister to stand there and treat with breaking the law as if it is nothing, Madam Speaker, that's very, 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 very disappointing, Madam Speaker. Very disappointing. It sets the wrong precedent, and it provides the wrong guidance to citizens outside, to children watching on, that breaking the law is acceptable. It cannot be, and it must not be, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the reason I raise the issue of short-term employment, Madam Speaker, is because for the financial year 2023, $300 million was spent on short-term employment.
Okay, so
230.
So member, I just want to question you a bit. While I understand you have a right to rebut, okay, you are almost over 20 minutes into your presentation with respect to rebuttal. I'm not going to let you go back to 2023. Short-term employment came up with a point raised by the member for Superior in a particular context. She referred to the Auditor General's report in a particular context. The Prime Minister responded. So while I understand you have a right to rebut, I'm not going to let us develop this. What we are dealing here with is not the IMF report, not the Auditor General's report, but the report of the Standing Finance Committee. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, as you go forward, to try and bring whatever points you're going to make into that, what we are debating here. Okay?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Duly guided. Madam Speaker, I was referring to this particular head, short-term employment, because in the requirement for additional funding, Madam Speaker, we have determined that the government is asking for substantial more monies for the purpose of funding short-term employment. When the questions were asked, the ministers refused to provide any sort of guidance as to how the short-term employment takes place. In fact, Madam Speaker, for 2024, over $210 million, again, will be spent on short-term employment. Madam Speaker, that becomes very important, Madam Speaker, because the figures, again, cited by everyone on that side. The minister in his presentation spoke about why short-term employment is very, very important. During the Standing Finance Committee, numbers were provided with regards to short-term employment, how many people were going to be employed. The only thing that was missing in the provision of the short-term employment, Madam Speaker, was how exactly these people are to be hired, why they are to be hired. A translation of some sort so that citizens of this country could explain why $210 million was going to be spent in 2024. Why additional supplementation? I believe it was over $120 million was being asked for this, under this variation for what is in fact employment padding, Madam Speaker. Because these are temporary jobs. And Madam Speaker, the reason that becomes important is because, again, IMF report speaks about unemployment. The Minister of Finance in his presentation spoke about this wonderful, glowing, low levels of unemployment in a recent newspaper release. In a newspaper article, the Minister spoke that IMF, we have now one of the lowest unemployment rates in the country, Madam Speaker, in the world. Lowest unemployment rates. Absolutely rubbish, Madam Speaker. Absolute rubbish. Because the fact is that when you compare the participation rate, when you compare the total labor force, what you would see is that the total labor force has shrunk by 42,000 persons. The number of persons employed has shrunk by 45,600 between 2015 and now. Madam Speaker, what that tells you is that somehow people are leaving the labor force. And the reason that we have to look at that a little bit more carefully, Madam Speaker, is because I believe, and the data so confirms, that a lot of that happens because people are moving from the labor force into what is employment padding, which is they're coming into short-term employment. Now, I heard the Prime Minister, Madam Speaker, attack somebody who's not here, a trade union leader, who I really don't know, a fellow named Leroy Batiste. Only because this union leader was complaining about contract employment. He was complaining about this additional funding for contract employment. And the union leader was focused on the need for full-time, gainful, continuous employment. I don't see nothing wrong with that, Madam Speaker. I cannot see anything wrong with anybody hoping that we move away from short-term employment into full-time, proper, productive employment, Madam Speaker. The point I want to make with regards to short-term employment is because there is no policy, there's no guidance factor. In fact, last year's Standing Finance Committee and in this year's Standing Finance Committee, it became clear in the explanations, Madam Speaker, that there's a random way of employment. that is guided by no fixed policy, which means that anyone can hire anybody under any terms and conditions once it's within 6 months as short-term employment. That is a dangerous precedent for accountability, especially when you start talking about $250 million, Madam Speaker, which is what is going to be spent in fiscal 2024. This is for employment padding, Madam Speaker, and it is of grave concern to persons like myself, because it's disguised unemployment, Madam Speaker. And disguised unemployment is a dangerous thing, because it basically means that citizens have no security of tenure. They can't participate in regular activities like going to the banks to get a loan, etc. They can't develop themselves. They have to live on the whims and fancies. They have to depend on the gratuities and the benefits and the whims and fancies of those opposite on the government side. They have created, Madam Speaker, a significant level of dependency on a substantially large component of the labor force for short-term employment, rather than creating the avenues for permanent, well-paying jobs, Madam Speaker. That's a fault of the government, the creation of a dependency, so that they could pull the string at any point in time and persons have to do what they say to do, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition raised the issue, and again it was raised during the Standing Finance Committee, that none of the money being spent will generate any new forms of revenue. That is a major concern, Madam Speaker. The Prime Minister himself, in his rant, suggested that nobody on the opposite side will come with any revenue-raising measure. Nobody will say this, nobody will say that. There's no interest on the revenue side, he said. We have been speaking, Madam Speaker, repeatedly about how to generate revenue. We have been chastising this government for spending money, for borrowing to repay debt only. We have been chastising this government for not spending money to create any new revenue streams, particularly for not creating any new streams to generate foreign exchange, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister challenged, and I accept this challenge, Madam Speaker. East-West Biotechnology Manufacturing Corridor. These are suggestions, Madam Speaker, that have been in the public domain now for more than 3 years. We have suggested to the government openly, we have suggested to the country, we have given the country these ideas. The government were free to utilize them, Madam Speaker. And I want to identify 12 of those items for revenue generation. The Prime Minister suggested, he challenged, I accept his challenge, Madam Speaker. East-West Corridor, Biotechnology Marketing, Digital Innovation Park at Sevilla, Cuba, Plymouth, and International Cruise Ship Marina. In Tobago again, the first locally branded hotel. In St. Madeleine, a sugar manufacturing facility. In West Port of Spain, the Trinidad Creative Arts Street Center. In Point Galeota, an energy logistics hub. In Tamana, a solar tech renewable energy park. In Piaco, aircraft maintenance repair and operations hub. In Cedras and Maruga, a southwest peninsula economic zone. In East Port of Spain, steel band manufacturing. And in Brescia Castle, an agro-processing complex. These are just 12 items, Madam Speaker, that we have been speaking about for the last 3 years, which the Ministry of Finance and the government on that side could have selected to use as revenue-raising measures of ways of increasing participation in the commercial activity and as ways of generating foreign exchange, if they were so inclined. Instead, they come here, Madam Speaker, and accuse the opposition of not having ideas for revenue generation when that is their responsibility. And the only reason they have not selected any of these items, Madam Speaker, is because it came from those of us on this side.
Honourable Member for Oropouche West, you have 1 more minute of ordinary time left. You're entitled to 15 more minutes of extended time, if you so wish to complete your presentation.
I thank you very much, Madam Speaker, I thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have just identified some issues on the revenue-making side. It is ironic that during the budget debate and today, during the Standing Finance Committee as well, no revenue-raising measures, no revenue-raising suggestions, no way has been suggested by any of those on that side as to how they are going to raise revenue. As a matter of fact, they've been extremely silent about it, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Minister in his presentation on this Standing Finance Committee debate, report debate, Madam Speaker, talked about reversing the fortunes of the country in 2026. It is ironic. It is ironic that in that commentary, not a single word was said about exactly how that was going to be reversed. In typical manner, they push things out there. In typical manner, they say it there and hope to hold on to it, hope the country will hold on to it. This is not the first time, Madam Speaker, they've done this before. They've done this before. During the Standing Finance Committee, Madam Speaker, we have looked at the issues, the concerns, the matters raised in the budget that were not addressed. Madam Speaker, there's one that I just want to pay passing mention to. I don't have the article in front of me, but Madam Speaker, I'm sure you'll recall. The Honourable Prime Minister, in returning from abroad and addressing a PNM meeting, the Honourable Prime Minister, Madam Speaker, promised $100 million. $100 million, instructed the Minister of Finance, who was sitting on his right, and told him, Minister of Finance, go and find the money, $100 million that will be spent, given to the members of the regiment, the TT Defence Force, and they will treat with the crime situation. They will find novel ways of treating with the crime situation. Madam Speaker, the Standing Finance Committee, not a single mention was made of that, because these are to pay arrears. Not a single word. Today, we have heard nothing from the Minister of Finance. And I challenge the Minister of Finance in his wind-up to tell us where in the Standing Finance Committee requests for additional funding or in the budget, where are these things? Where is this money? Is it that they just stand up and pontificate $100 million for this and $100 million for this, throw money at it figuratively, because when the time comes, they do not pay the money? There's no reference to it. It was all, Madam Speaker, flam. It was all a whim and fancy, designed to mislead the population of this country, because they believe that the population have short memories. They really believe that the population is blind, deaf, and inconsiderate. They're not knowing the facts, Madam Speaker. We don't know. That is what they believe in, Madam Speaker, which is why the ministers will come and say everything is going great, the country is going wonderful, when outside there the reality is completely different, Madam Speaker. They are clueless because they live in their own bubble, protected by security 24/7. They don't understand how dangerous it is, life is outside there. They don't understand the fear and trepidation that people are living under, Madam Speaker. Protected by their salaries and their perks. They don't understand the difficulties women have in traveling today. They don't understand the challenges that people have in buying food, Madam Speaker. That is because they are protected, they are living in their own bubble. Kudos to them, Madam Speaker, but don't come here and pretend that they are speaking to the population, speaking on behalf of the population, Madam Speaker, because they are not. Madam Speaker, there's another issue here, Madam Speaker. Today a document was shared with me, which gave me some even greater trepidation, because this too is going to be paid for via the Standing Finance Committee, increased in budgetary allocation. A new app has been commissioned by the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government to allow citizens to report legal government issues in real time, according to this communication, in real time via their mobile devices nationwide. An app, Madam Speaker. So suddenly today, after this app is launched, a citizen who has a pothole in front of his road, and this is a minor road, so this is a back road, a side street, he could now pick up the phone and call the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development and Local Government and report it. And somehow the ministry is going to get involved. This is an absolute waste of time and money again. You are coming to the Parliament to ask for money to waste it, Madam Speaker. And it's a waste because the citizens have already been making these reports to the local government councillors. The minister is trying to usurp the authority of the local government councillors. They have already been making these reports to the councillors. And you know what the problem is, Madam Speaker? The councils are being underfunded. The regional corporations are being underfunded. The borough corporations are being underfunded. So they can't do the kind of repairs that the minister wants to get involved in. Madam Speaker, it's a waste of time and resources, Madam Speaker. And I challenge the minister, who will probably speak at some point in time today when he comes back from his lunch break, or whenever he comes back from wherever he went to. I challenge him to tell us, Madam Speaker, who got the contract to develop this app, where the money came from, what is the cost in total in man-hours and of the ministry staff, and the contract that has awarded, Madam Speaker. Let us know what this has cost taxpayers' money, because as far as I'm concerned, Madam Speaker, it's a complete waste of time. Madam Speaker, we need to kickstart this economy, because despite all the talk on the other side, Madam Speaker, this economy has collapsed. We have said it repeatedly, it has collapsed. The minister is denying same, but statistics do not lie. The economy is still substantially smaller than it was pre-COVID, and it was substantially smaller then and now than it was when they came into office. Madam Speaker, we need to kickstart the economy, but this time it must work for all, Madam Speaker. The World Economic Forum in April this year, Madam Speaker, in a short article speaking about how the rest of the world needs to operate, suggested that the use of GDP growth it's a useful measure, but it's not telling us a lot about the health of the economy. It's a blunt instrument, according to the World Economic Forum. The Economic Forum says it's not a good substitute for evaluating living standards. It does not tell us much about the environmental impact, and it doesn't say how resilient an economy is to shocks. And it doesn't tell if the types of investments being made will generate innovation and returns in the long run. Pursuing growth at all costs is therefore a myopic approach. The quality of growth, Madam Speaker, matters as much, if not more, than its speed. Madam Speaker, I concur totally with this, Madam Speaker. And one of the factors, and I go back to the Prime Minister and the others' commentary on the revenue side. If you want to generate an industry, you don't get up overnight in the morning and say, listen, we want to give tax concessions for gate. We want to give gate for doctors. We're going to provide doctors with gate all of a sudden, Madam Speaker. That is not how you do this thing. If you want to create medical tourism, Madam Speaker, then you decide what exactly you need to get done. What kind of tourism, what is the nature of the tourism? And then you build the capacity, you create the infrastructure, and you train the human resource to fulfill those roles. That is how you create employment that is long-lasting. That is how you create employment that is permanent. And I'm just using health as an example. The Minister of Health just recently announced that gate will be provided for medical students, Madam Speaker. But doctors we have more than 400 doctors reportedly in this country unemployed. Unemployed, Madam Speaker. We have nurses that are unemployed, and ironically, we have hospitals that are short-staffed. So you're going to give training for gate. Again, Madam Speaker, this is a lack of vision on the part of the government. They do not know where they want to go, and therefore they do not know how to get there. And as a result of that, Madam Speaker, all they're doing is throwing money left, right, and center, Madam Speaker. That's not the way, Madam Speaker. We need new policy makers. We need new decision makers, Madam Speaker. This government simply does not have the capability, capacity, or the knowledge to do what is required, Madam Speaker. What is required, quite frankly and quite simply, I want to refer the Minister of Finance and the entire government to this World Economic Forum report dated April 29th, 2024. It's on the World Economic Forum's website, and I want to refer them to this last item here, Madam Speaker, and I want to close with this. Madam Speaker, just to confirm how much time I may have.
You end at 4:47. That's your full time.
Oh, I have plenty of time, Madam Speaker. Much time. Much of a chagrin of my
Just use it to deal with the report.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay, so let's go to the report, Madam Speaker. I will deal with this in the conclusion. Let's go to the report. Madam Speaker, we are here today debating the Standing Finance Committee report, correct? Correct. Do you know, Madam Speaker, that up to today, commitments made by the members opposite that they will provide documentation to clarify questions raised in the Standing Finance Committee, up to today we have not received all of them? So we are debating, in essence, We are looking to rubber stamp. That is what this government has called us here to do today, to rubber stamp without the benefit of the information and the clarification. We are debating a document, Madam Speaker, which is missing parts, substantial parts. So we have to now approve $2.3 billion without knowing where it's going to be spent. Madam Speaker, there's an issue with regards to the legal fees touched on by the leader of the opposition, Madam Speaker. The Prime Minister responded to that in anger. In anger. The fact of the matter is, Madam Speaker, that there's no legal requirement. There's no legal, and the Attorney General will speak sometime subsequently, I assume, sir. There's no legal requirement to not provide information. In my view, and it will be challenged at some point, it will be challenged in court if necessary. There's no legal requirement for the Attorney General to be able to stand and say he's not providing the names of the individuals, the names of employees of the lawyers that have been hired, or the value of their payments, Madam Speaker. That is a fabrication of the Honorable Attorney General that he repeated again in the Standing Finance Committee earlier this week, and that he has repeated previously as well. Because, Madam Speaker, it is possible to go through the Freedom of Information Act and get that very same documentation. It has happened before. And he provides it via the Freedom of Information Act to a member, a citizen, but will not provide it here to the Parliament where he's supposed to come and account, Madam Speaker. The fact that under Freedom of Information it must be provided tells me, Madam Speaker, that by law there's no protection for privacy. There's none. It is a fabrication of this minister. And it's ironic, Madam Speaker, that previous Attorney Generals provided the information. Previous Attorney Generals, because I remember the former Attorney General had provided that information to this very same House in great detail. It is only this Attorney General who seems to have some fear of providing information, of providing clarity when it comes to accounting for the public purse. He is obligated, as far as I'm concerned, he could feel free when he speaks afterwards to cite the law. Sorry, my apologies, Madam Speaker. The Honorable Attorney General can feel free to provide the law that justifies his position. And until then, Madam Speaker, I am convinced that he is, beyond measure, I am convinced that he is obligated to provide the information as required, and it should have been provided today. It should have been provided today, Madam Speaker. Today at 11 o'clock, that was the last time I checked my rotunda to find out whether the Attorney General had kept his word to provide information in as limited as he had said he was going to provide it. As extremely limited, not even that, Madam Speaker, at 11 o'clock today. Now, if you give it to me at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, when we are in the midst of debate, clearly the intention is clear. They don't want to debate it, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I close, Madam Speaker, I think that this government is completely clueless. They have lost any touch with the status and the conditions that citizens of this country are living in and experiencing now. And as a result of that, none of the monies being approved today will improve the quality and standard of lives of any of our citizens being burdened by crime, unemployment, poverty, high prices, etc., Madam Speaker, flooding. None of those critical issues will be addressed because according to this government, everything is hunky-dory. Everything is going well, when the facts reveal something completely different. Madam Speaker, I thank you very much.